Chapter 9. Testing the Internet. As I looked at the 10 people who were testing the Internet for the first time while holding books in their hands, a smile appeared on my face. Ever since the old man, who I found out was the priest of this church, prayed for the first time and the Internet book appeared in his hand, the other new people had also tried to pray and were shocked that the book appeared for them as well. One of the things I set up was that when someone held the book, the knowledge of how it works, how to use the Internet, the functions of each application, and all the most important and relevant information was sent to people's minds. They were scared when they felt the new knowledge coming into their minds, but once they understood what it was all about, they quickly started experimenting with the Internet and were shocked by what they saw. Amber's POV. Holding the God of the Internet book in my hand, I was shocked to see the contents inside. As soon as I opened the library, according to the instructions that the God of the Internet had mentally taught me, I saw a bookshelf full of beautiful books. When Mr. Athenos showed the library in his book, I had noticed that the covers of the books were very beautiful, like little works of art, but when I looked at them more closely and calmly, I couldn't help but be amazed at how beautiful the artwork was. Unlike ordinary books that just had a plain leather cover, these library books had personalized covers with extremely delicate designs. I'm sure each of these books could be sold for thousands of gold coins if they were sold to the nobles. But here, the Internet God let us buy these books for the price of just one Internet coin. The most shocking thing was to see the book that Mr. Athenos showed, Mortal Magic, Apprentice, with a delicate cover showing a young wizard reading a book with fire spells around him, costing only one Internet coin. From what I remember from conversations on the street, a magic book was extremely expensive, with books for apprentice mages costing more than one gold coin. Considering that a commoner family of 4 could live on a few silver coins for a year, a single book costing more than a gold coin was something that no ordinary commoner could afford, unless they were lucky enough to be noticed by a noble magician. But the God of the Internet was making this knowledge available to us for the mere price of one Internet coin, something we didn't even have to spend money to get. With curiosity, I began to look at the covers of the other books, admiring the beauty of it all, and one of the books caught my eye. Her Noble Desire. This book had a cover depicting a beautiful blonde girl, delicate and noble, standing next to a handsome black-haired noble boy wearing a crown with a cold expression on his face. When I gently clicked on the cover of this book, I saw the image of the book enlarge and completely replace the book I was holding. Looking at the beautiful cover drawn on my hand now in a large size, I was even more enchanted by the delicacy of this drawing, making me want to keep it in my room. Since I hadn't paid the one Internet coin to read the book, I could only read the summary of the book, so I read it with curiosity and was delighted by how interesting and intriguing this story was. This story was about a beautiful girl, the daughter of a baron, who was abandoned after her mother died and her father married another noblewoman. Having to live alone, she suffered a lot, but she always treated everyone with great courtesy. Until the day she helped an old lady cross the street and a handsome prince saw her, and a love story developed between them. I had never seen a story as innovative and captivating as this one, which really made me want to read more of this story. So without thinking twice, I bought this book with my only Internet coin. As soon as I bought it, the book in my hand flashed with white light, causing beautiful stars to fly around, and the entire contents of the book were unlocked for me. Without realizing it, I sat down on one of the pews and read the story with great interest. Surprisingly, with each chapter one read, there were a few comments from other believers in the God of the Internet commenting on something that happened in that chapter. Some girls made jokes that made me laugh. Other girls cursed the protagonist's stepmother, which I agreed with. Other girls just thanked me for the chapter. When I saw that I could also leave comments, I decided to take the test and write my comment with these girls as well. Writing on the Internet was different from what I was used to. Instead of picking up a pen and actually writing, we just had to click on the letters with our fingers, and the letters appeared in the books. Thanks for the chapter. I'm really enjoying reading it, Amber. After checking the spelling more than 3 times, I finally plucked up the courage to post my comment for fear of making the Internet God angry. But when I saw that nothing happened, I was relieved and more confident to leave more comments in the following chapters. Unfortunately, when I finished reading the 6th chapter, a warning appeared on my screen. Your 60 minutes are up. To continue reading, pray to the God of the Internet and receive another 60 minutes of access. Shocked, I looked around and noticed that other people were also worried as they looked at Mr. Athenos. Excuse me, Mr. Athenos. A warning appeared in my book. Maybe the god of the internet is angry with me? Jay, a man in his 40s, asked anxiously. On my screen too, Mr. Athenos, please apologize to the god of the internet for me. I won't comment on any more books. Brianna, a 28-year-old woman, also said worriedly. But Mr. Athenos just smiled and shook his head. Don't worry, the god of the internet is not angry with you. It's just that each prayer gives you access to the internet for 1 hour, after which you have to pray again to continue using the internet. If you don't want to use it anymore, you just have to wait and the book will disappear naturally. When I heard this, I was surprised. Brianna was the first to pray again so that the warning on her book disappeared and she could continue reading. Looking at the book in her hand, I was surprised that she was reading the same book as me. Jay was reading the book on magic. While I was distracted by looking at the books each person was reading, I felt my hand getting lighter. When I looked down, I noticed that my book was gone, and worry came over me. Am I going to lose the book I bought? I asked myself anxiously. So I prayed the prayer of the god of the internet again. Even though I didn't know the meaning of various words like digital, virtual, cybernetics, viruses, hackers, or downloads, I could feel that these words meant something very important, so I prayed very carefully. O God of the internet, Lord of magic wires and digital paths, grant us fast connections and digital wisdom. Let your wisdom flow through my body. May our thoughts travel like lightning through your virtual domains, guided by your cyber light on the path to glory. In your grace, protect us from viruses and hackers, and may our downloads always be complete. Amen. I said softly. As soon as I finished praying, I felt as if I'd become more tired, and the book appeared in my hand, this time without the pink cover of the book I'd bought. I quickly opened the library and realized that the book was still there for me to read whenever I wanted. Sigh. I sighed with relief, but it left me with one question. Mr. Athenos, why did I feel more tired after praying? I asked. Looking at me with those captivating blue eyes, he smiled as he explained. Prayer is like powerful magic. Whenever you pray, you send a part of your faith to the God you're praying to, helping the God you're praying to. Come here, he said as he extended his hand. Confused, I walked over and put my hand against his. Even though he was wearing the body of a marble statue, his hand was as warm as a real person's. I closed my eyes for a few seconds, and he just held my hand while everyone looked at us curiously, which made me feel a little embarrassed because it was the first time I had touched a man's hand for so long. Suddenly, he opened his eyes and smiled at me. From what I've seen of you, you can possibly use the internet for 5 to 7 hours a day before you're completely exhausted, but when you sleep, that energy recharges and you'll be able to connect to the internet for the same amount of time the next day. Hearing this, I was surprised. What about me, Mr. Athenos? Jacob, the little boy to whom Lord Athenos had lent his book, also came running to ask. Then Mr. Athenos did the same with Jacob and found that he could use the internet for 3 to 4 hours a day. After that, everyone asked to be tested. The average was that young people and old people were able to use the internet for less time, while adults had a longer average usage time. But according to Lord Athenos, as long as we can train magic and increase our mana, it would be possible to extend this time. So everyone should think about buying the magic book to try it. After confirming this, I went back to my book and used the remaining time to continue reading. Chapter 10. Spreading the Internet. After telling them how to use the internet and encouraging them to use social media, I decided to take my mind off the statue and just watch. My job as God wasn't to hold the hands of mortals and show them everything they should do. I just wanted to guide them from a distance while I let the internet spread. So after my consciousness left the statue, my facial features remained on the statue, but all the colors of the statue disappeared, leaving only the cold white marble in place. The believers looked at the statue for a few more seconds before gathering around to talk about me and what to do now that the God they had been waiting for had appeared. Since I had taken the statue as my own, my divine consciousness could see a few hundred meters around the statue, but nothing beyond that. So even though I wasn't there in person, I was able to hover above them and observe their conversations without them knowing. What are we going to do now, Father Robert? Amber asked. As believers in the God of the Internet, nothing could be fairer than to spread the word about the Internet to other people. The old man replied after some thought. Even if it wasn't an obligation, I still wanted to teach my son the prayer of the God of the Internet. Since he's 6 now, if he could start learning magic from an early age via the Internet, it might open up an opportunity for him to join the Magic Academy as a student when he gets older. Jay said his thoughts, surprising the other people. That is true, with the knowledge of magic that the God of the Internet makes available on the Internet. As long as that knowledge is used wisely, it can change lives. Father Robert commented. Brianna also realized something. Not to mention that if my relatives who live in the villages around the city knew how to use the Internet, we could even stay in touch from afar. After hearing her idea of using the carrier pigeon, the other believers were also surprised at how useful it really was. The only fear they still had was about the safety of praying to one God so many times in one day. Even though they had been praying regularly in this church for months, some even for years, they only prayed once a week at most. And because their prayer never had a goal, they never felt the weakness they feel today when they pray to the God of the Internet. This weakness caused by prayer made them a little worried about the side effects of prayer. Have you realized that we might not be the only believers in the God of the Internet? Father Robert asked in a serious voice, piquing the interest of the other believers. What do you mean? Amber asked, confused. Turning his book over and showing it to them, the priest explained. As you can see, there are several other publications or comments in the books that were made a few days ago, and since the Internet God only appeared to us today, this means that there are already people elsewhere who know about the Internet God and pray to him as well. When they saw this, they realized that they had overlooked this point. They only noticed that there were other comments on the Internet, but they didn't realize that they might have been made by other people in other places. When they opened the carrier pigeon, they began to pay attention to how these people talked, what they talked about, and from the way these people acted, they deduced that these people might live somewhere far away from their city, perhaps in a city on the outskirts of the Arcaner Kingdom. How about we ask these people how this prayer fatigue works and if there are any side effects? Amber suggested, making the group look surprised. I think that's a good idea. Father Robert commented. Amber, can you do the post for us? I think so. Amber replied a little unsure, but clicked on post anyway. Hello, fellow believers in the God of the Internet. Today is my first day on the Internet, and I'm having doubts about prayer and the fatigue it causes. Can anyone enlighten me on this? She wrote in the most formal and beautiful way she could think of, even asking other people for tips on how to make her message as polite as possible, and after some consideration, she finally clicked send. The problem was that there were no other users on the Internet. All the posts about carrier pigeon and the comments on the book chapters were made by me using accounts with fake nicknames. But when I realized that my early followers believed that these fake accounts were real people, I could take advantage of that to help them clear up some doubts without them knowing it was me. Someone replied. Amber replied excitedly when she saw a bell with a notification, 1, in the corner of the screen. Clicking on the bell, Amber saw the message that appeared. Ladybug replied to your message. Ladybug liked your post. Clicking on this message updated her post, and Amber saw that there was now a thumbs up icon below the post with a number 1 next to it, indicating that a person liked what she had posted, which made her very happy. Ladybug, I had the same doubt as you when I first prayed to the God of the Internet. Don't worry, it's normal. The tiredness is really a bit uncomfortable at first, and it can affect you during the day. So the recommended thing is not to use the Internet too much at the beginning of the day and leave it for the evening, because you can sleep later. But when you wake up, it's as if nothing happened and you can pray again without any problems. Reading the message aloud, both Amber and the others in the group were relieved to hear this response. It looks like this is really what Lord Athenos said, Jay said with a sigh of relief. Before anyone else could comment, another message appeared in Amber's book. Cat Noir replied to your post. Cat Noir liked your post. Seeing that someone else had liked her post and commented back made Amber feel a very pleasant sense of satisfaction in her chest, making her feel very proud to see that yet another person she didn't know had liked something she had said. Cat Noir, I divide my Internet use into 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the afternoon, and 3 hours in the evening. As the book screen is backlit, you can read at night in the dark as if it were still day. Seeing that you could read books even in the dark made the people in the group even more surprised. Realizing that apparently praying to the god of the internet wasn't as evil as they had feared, they became more confident about doing it. So, after chatting some more, everyone went off to do their routines for the day. Unfortunately, I couldn't keep an eye on them when they left the church, but when they prayed to me and activated the internet, I could see where they were and what they were doing. What I was doing was a major invasion of privacy for the levels of my old world, but for this world it was no big deal. Of course, powerful mages might be able to tell if I was spying on them, since I was only a rank 1 embryonic god. As my god rank increased and I became stronger, I would be able to hide my presence more easily, to the point where even archmages wouldn't be able to notice me. After all, this was still a small world, and the maximum power level here was nothing compared to presences in larger worlds. But since I was still at the lowest power level of a god, it wouldn't be a good idea to antagonize very powerful mages, especially with a god like me who lacked offensive power. That was one of the main reasons why the gods underestimated the god of creativity. Even though I had the power of creation, the fact that I could even create living beings at the lowest power level was already a commendable achievement. Everything I did was much more expensive than other gods. If I wanted to make a fireball attack, I would use many times more divine power to make that fireball than a god with a directly related deity. Just as I had been a jack of all trades and master of none in my previous life, learning different areas of game and software development, I had never specialized in any of them. My god of creativity was exactly the same. I could do everything but nothing as well as the original gods of those things. But unlike the previous god of creativity, who suffered from the high cost of doing everything, I had found a great way to deal with this problem. And when I saw how much divine power I had received on my first day in the mortal world, I had a big smile on my face. Character status. Name: Adrian Innovation. Title: God of Creativity, God of Internet. Level: Embryonic Divinity Rank 1. Divine Power: 1463/10,000-1495/10,000 plus 32. On the first day alone, I had gained 32 divine power points, a number that I'm sure was at least among the top of my competitors, but a number that would surely shoot higher as time went on. Chapter 11. Magic Talent. When I looked at the 32 divine power points I received at the end of the night, I had a big smile on my face. After all the optimization I had done with the internet, the cost of running the internet for each user was 0.5 divine power points per hour. Considering that each user's prayer earned me 1 divine power point, this meant that I received 0.5 divine power points of profit per prayer from each believer. The initial number of believers was 10 people, but from 10 people, it quickly grew to 16 by the end of the night when some of the believers showed the internet to their family. With their average use of 4 hours a day, taking into account some who used it for 6 hours, and some who only had 2 hours a day to use the internet. In total, they had prayed to me 64 times, but because of the operating cost of 0.5 divine power points, this meant that the divine power gain I received was only 32 points. This may seem very low considering that I needed to collect 10,000 divine power points to become a rank 2 embryonic deity, but to use another comparison, I was only receiving 20 divine power points a week from the teachers at school, and on my first day alone I had already received 60% more than I had in a week, 11 times more than the average I received in a day before I came to this world. When the mortals went asleep, I went asleep. Since only a part of my consciousness was in this small world, while my main consciousness was still in my body in the divine world, I needed my body to sleep in the divine world so that I could rest. The school test was based on the results of the realm we were assigned to in this small world, and since time passed twice as fast in this small world as in the divine world, it meant that 8 hours of sleep in the small world would only be 4 hours of sleep in the divine world. So I divided my sleep to sleep twice in one day to synchronize the two places. As my strength increased, the need for sleep would decrease, so this problem would disappear over time, but now that I was still only a rank 1 embryonic divinity, I had to deal with this problem. Even though my consciousness was split, my body was still functioning perfectly. In fact, to my body, it felt like that part of my consciousness was in a VR world that my main consciousness saw as a computer screen. I could still focus on things in the divine world, but I could also spend hours just looking at the small world without worrying about getting bored. It was a difficult feeling to explain, but I think I passed on a playful idea. When I woke up after 4 hours of sleep, my awareness of the small world woke up and I could feel that there were already believers connected to the internet. Out of curiosity, I used my power to see what people were doing. Of the 9 users currently connected to the internet, 8 were using the library, while only 1 was using the carrier pigeon. This user acted just like a normal person from my past world, lying lazily in bed while reading the feed of social media posts. As for the users who were using the library, I noticed that 4 of them were in the same place, and one of them was a user who had logged in for the first time yesterday, and the other 3 users had prayed for the first time a few minutes ago. So I decided to see what these 3 people were doing together. Third POV. Are you sure this is free? A man asked skeptically as he held up the internet book and looked in shock at the content he could read and learn for free. Yes, my son got into a lot of mischief yesterday morning, so my wife sent him to spend the day in the old church with Father Robert as punishment, the man said proudly, receiving nods from the other men. This was a common occurrence. When children got into mischief, their parents would send them to church as punishment, because it was very boring to sit in church and listen to the priest talk about a God that nobody thought existed. But to our surprise, when the boy returned home, he came back with a delicate book with a drawing of a noble magician. You don't know how angry my wife was. She thought he had stolen it from some nobleman. She almost led him with the beating she gave him. Ha ha ha. The man laughed as he explained, and his friends laughed too as they imagined the scene. But while she was beating him up, the book magically disappeared, making her even more worried that the wizard had used something from the book and would come to our house to take revenge. Fortunately, the boy showed her that the book was actually summoned by a prayer to the God of the internet, the God Father Robert had believed in for so long, the man explained. Hearing this explanation, the man's friends were even more surprised. How come Father Robert never taught this prayer before? One of the men asked as he looked curiously at the delicate books in the library. Even though he was a commoner who didn't usually read because he couldn't afford books, he always saw nobles and wizards walking around with books and was envious. Now that he could read books that were just as fine, if not finer, than those of the nobles, the man was very excited. According to my boy, the messenger of the God of the internet came down to the church yesterday and personally taught them this prayer. The man explained while looking at the corner of his library screen with a broad smile. Seeing the 32 internet coins available in his account, the man felt very proud of the idea of introducing the internet to his friends. When he returned home, his son and wife were already using the internet, so his wife invited him to join, and he received 10 internet coins for joining through her invitation. Since he didn't have anyone to invite, he could only get the 1 internet coin from the daily check-in, which he used to buy a book to read. Choosing the book with the most beautiful and elegant cover, a book that told the story of how a commoner who found a magical book had risen to become an archmage, Sam stayed up late reading. He had never imagined that reading could be so much fun, especially when he could see other readers' comments at the end of the chapters and laugh at the nonsense other people said. This morning, when he logged onto the internet for the first time, he realized that he could log on again and get 2 more internet coins. But looking at the magic books and thinking about the story he had read the night before, Sam decided that he would try to invite his friends online to get the 10 internet coins that their invitation would bring him. Sam's idea was simple. He would use 1 internet coin to buy the Apprentice Magic book and dedicate himself to learning magic while collecting internet coins, so that if he learned well, he would have money to buy more advanced books in the future. Thinking that he could be like the protagonist of the book he read, even though he was over 30 years old, Sam was still excited to dedicate himself to learning while feeling grateful to the God of the internet for giving him this opportunity. When he told his friends about the internet God and how magical the internet was, they received the news with a lot of doubt and skepticism. But when he showed them the internet book and explained its features, their eyes lit up with interest that made Sam laugh with pride. Soon his friends were convinced to pray once, and he saw the 30 internet coins he received for these invitations added to the 2 internet coins he had in his account. "Look, my wife just sent me a message," Sam said excitedly as he pointed to his internet book, causing his friends to look at it with curiosity and interest. Sam clicked on the message and saw it on his screen. "Martha, husband, I managed to do the Lumos spell. I think I have a talent for magic." Seeing this message from his wife, Sam was shocked and quickly replied, As he awkwardly typed into the book, his friends were shocked. "Since when is your wife a wizard, Sam? Does she have a master?" One man asked, shocked and frightened. "She's never had a master. She told me yesterday that she was going to buy the magic book with today's internet coins to try it out. Who knew she had the talent for it?" Sam replied, even more shocked by the news. "Sam, that's great news, wife. I'll be home soon to help you." Sam replied a little awkwardly on social media, but he quickly ignored the work he had to do today and rushed home to help his wife in any way he could. If she really had magical talent, the money they would receive in the future would be far greater than what he earned as a butcher. Seeing Sam running home to help his wife who had learned magic on the internet, Sam's three friends looked at him with envy, but that was quickly replaced by anticipation when they saw that the book she had used to learn magic was also available to them. "What if I have magical talent too?" The three men mentally asked themselves as they spent their one internet coin to buy the magic book, dreaming that they too would have magical talent like Sam's wife. Even if they didn't have any talent, couldn't they go home and see if their wives had any? And what about their children? The chances of at least one person in their family having magical talent were slim, but not zero. Chapter 12, Robert's Problem. With the incentive of internet coins, internet users invited more and more people. What started as 10 people became 16 by the end of the day. The next day, the number that started at 16 had jumped to 33 people, earning me a total of 77 divine power points after deducting the cost of running the internet. Among the new users, their main focus was on the library, especially the books on magic. Because of those 17 new people, 10 of them had learned about the internet because of Sam and Martha's celebration of their newly discovered magical talent. The curious neighbors were puzzled as to why Martha was celebrating so much and want to find out what was going on. Martha even thought about keeping the internet a secret and bragging about her magical talent, but seeing the opportunity to get 100 internet coins in front of her, Martha thought long and hard and told them about the internet. Following her example, they also started using the internet and tried to learn how to use their friend. But magical talent wasn't that common. Out of the 10 people who learned about the internet from Martha, only one person discovered that he had a magical talent, but it was a very basic talent. But for ordinary people like them, even though the talent was basic, it was still a great reason to celebrate. The next day, the number of people who knew about the internet increased even more. From 33 people the day before, the number of believers had risen to 60 the next day. Some people just learned about the internet and didn't tell anyone, while others took advantage of the fact that no one knew about the internet and told people they trusted so that they would receive internet coins for those invitations. That day I received a total of 150 divine power points through the prayers of these believers. Considering that the average for an ordinary god was for a believer to pray to him only once a week to receive an average of 150 divine power points a day, that god would have to have more than 1,000 believers, while I received the same amount of divine power with only 60. I didn't know how the other gods in the other cities were doing, but considering how impressive their powers were, I had no doubt that there were gods with tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of worshippers from a single demonstration of power. Besides, while I was in a realm controlled by logic-driven wizards who didn't care much for gods, as evidenced by how empty the local church was before I showed up, my competitors probably didn't have it that hard. But I didn't let that deter me. My growth might be slow at first, but once I had thousands of believers, my divine power would skyrocket. Considering that a single follower of mine generated the same amount of divine power points as more than 17 followers of other gods, this was my great advantage. After all, their worshippers praying once a day couldn't compete with my worshippers praying 5 or more times a day, 7 days a week. While I was analyzing the divine power I was receiving and thinking about what I could do with this divine power to make the internet more interesting for them, I received a special prayer. When I paid attention to it, I noticed that it was from Father Robert. "Oh great God of the internet, thank you for all the changes you are making with your people. This old man would like to clear up some doubts that are haunting my old mind. If possible, could you send someone to help this old man?" He asked very sincerely through prayer. Thinking about it, I decided to go down to the mortal world and see what Father Robert's doubts were. Of course, I had to maintain my persona as Athenos, the messenger of God. In front of Robert, the statue that had been standing still for 3 days finally began to move again, causing him to look at it in amazement and excitement. "Thank you, Lord Athenos, for coming." Robert bowed respectfully as he thanked me. I just nodded. "My God told me you needed help on your way." "Yes, Lord Athenos, I'm sorry to bother you. It's just that in the last few days, with the popularization of the internet, this useless old man has realized even more how useless I was, and I couldn't find anything useful I could do for our God." Father Robert sighed. When I heard that, I was surprised. But when I thought about it, it was really true. Robert didn't have much to do. With the internet already spreading the prayer of the internet God, and Robert knowing very little about me, he really didn't have as much use for believers as he used to. Since I thought that the church was the ideal connection between the God and the believers, I knew that it wouldn't be a good idea to give it up, so I started to think of a solution. Robert noticed me thinking and politely kept quiet while he waited for me to finish. "I think I've come up with some ideas on how you can show your usefulness to the internet God," I said after thinking of something. There were no public schools in this world. Except for magic schools, children learned to read and write at home from their parents, who were fortunate enough to be educated by their own parents. But even though the percentage of literate people was higher than in other kingdoms, the percentage of illiterate people was still very high. And to use the internet, you had to be able to read what was on the internet. Since I couldn't teach people to read on my own, Father Robert could be useful. When he heard that I had an idea, Robert became curious and looked at me excitedly. As you may have noticed, in order to use the internet, a person must at least be able to read in order to understand the knowledge that the God of the internet makes available to believers. But there are many people who cannot read. How about using the church to teach children and adults who cannot read to read so that they can use the internet? I suggested. Upon hearing this and realizing how useful this would be to the God of the internet, Robert's eyes lit up in amazement. "Yes, I can do that," he replied excitedly. "Not only can you teach people to read and write, but you can also help people who don't know how to use the internet to learn how to use it, helping believers to go even deeper in their faith in the God of the internet," I explained, making Robert's eyes shine even brighter. "Thank you, Lord Athenos. With your enlightenment, I already know what I need to do to be useful to the God of the internet," he said excitedly as he bowed to me in thanks. Seeing how happy he was to be useful, I could imagine why they were like that. After living in the church for so many years, even with difficulty and not knowing which God he was praying to, when the God finally appeared and he could be useful to that God, it was a little disheartening for Robert to find out that he couldn't do anything to help, as if his life's purpose could never be completed. But with my ideas, Robert realized that he had several other ways to be useful besides just doing masses and trying to convince people to follow a path under his God. Frankly, I didn't even need people to worship me as long as they used the internet. Considering how high the atheist rate was in my previous world, I'm sure people would still use a God's internet even if they didn't believe in gods. So for me, as long as the internet was useful, it was worth it. But this conversation also made me realize a major flaw in the internet. All the entertainment on the internet today was for educated people, even though the number of illiterate people was very high. So I had to think of something I could do that illiterate people could also enjoy on the internet. /NuNuNote/ Comment on your ideas of what it can do for illiterate people. I already have an idea in mind, but your ideas could be useful for the next features, or even to improve the feature I'm already writing about. Chapter 13, First Game. The first thing I thought of to get illiterate people to use the internet would be to make some kind of text-to-speech tool that would read all the text on the screen, so that the believer could understand everything that was being said. The usefulness of this for books would be very high, but I had already done some tests and making the internet reproduce sounds was still very expensive. While the cost of using the internet per hour was 0.5 divine power points, if I added this option, I might not make a profit or even make a loss, since I would only receive 1 divine power point and spend more than that to make the internet available to the believers for an hour. So doing this now was not feasible. Of course, as I became more powerful, my control over my divinity would increase, so I could tweak it better and unlock more functions in the future. But for now, my focus should be on finding a way around this problem. And one of the ways I came up with was to make a game. Of course, for people in this world who have never seen anything like the modern games in my world, there's no point in me developing Elden Ring and getting them to play it. they'll be more scared than entertained. Not to mention that I couldn't even make games that advanced while I'm so weak. But I could start with easier games. Father Robert. I called to the old man who was gathering books and things needed to teach people how to write. When he heard me call his name, the old man looked at me with bright eyes and quickly approached. Yes, Lord Athenos? Tell me, what kind of games are most common among the commoners? I asked. Games? The old man asked, puzzled. Yes, games, like cards, or something to bet on. What is usually entertaining people in the kingdom of Arcantor? I asked. When he heard my explanation, his face lit up and he quickly began to explain. The most common games in taverns among men are dice games, or checkers, or fighting. He said the last part a little embarrassed. Hearing that, I realized he hadn't said card games. Are there any kind of card games that use playing cards? Cards? Playing cards? I don't think I've ever seen anything like that, Lord Athenos. Maybe there is something like that among the nobles, but we commoners just play simple games, he said modestly, making me nod. Considering that card games required that the cards in the deck be identical to avoid cheating, it was understandable that this type of game hadn't been popularized in this world yet. This was an opportunity for me. Although the deck had letters and numbers, even if the players were illiterate, they could just memorize the symbols and colors, and they would know exactly what the cards were called. And since entertainment in this world was extremely precarious, with people having to throw dice to play and have fun, if I put deck games on the internet, it would possibly become a fever among the commoners. So while I kept part of my consciousness in the mortal world with Robert, helping him plan the school and how to teach the population, my body in the divine world quickly began to develop the game. First, the game had to be simple. Designing the deck of cards was the easy part. The hard part was coding the game and making it work exactly the way I wanted it to, like an internet app, and then setting up a way for players to play against each other online, or even a way for nearby players to play together. So I started developing. First, I decided to start with 3 types of games available. Solitaire, where the player would play alone with the sole purpose of organizing the shuffled cards, moving them between different columns according to certain rules, usually alternating colors and sorting them from ace to king, until all the cards were organized into 4 complete piles, 1 for each suit. The game wasn't competitive at all, although I added a score and leaderboard to make it more fun and addictive, but I knew this game would be dominated by more casual players. The second game I would make would be Blackjack, a card game where players compete against the dealer, in this case an NPC from the internet, trying to get a hand with a total value closer to 21 without going over that number. The goal is to beat the dealer, either by reaching 21 with the first 2 cards, a blackjack, or by having a higher value hand than the dealer without going bust. This game would be a cooperative game. Since the players wouldn't be competing against each other, they could get together in groups and have fun playing against the dealer. And the last game would be the most competitive of the 3, poker. A card game where the player was dealt 5 cards and could bet against the other players to see who had the strongest cards. The fun of poker was in the betting, so I had to think of a way to make it so that there was betting, but that it didn't destroy the players' lives, until I thought I could make it so that players could buy up to 30 chips a day with 3 internet coins. That way, players could bet on the internet without losing their real-life income. Of course, if players wanted to bet with real money, just like they did in craps, that was none of my business, nor was I anyone's babysitter. With this structure in place, the next step was to program all the features I'd come up with and make it look good to the public. To do this, I took a lot of inspiration from the designs of the poker apps in my old world, with a green velvet table, avatars representing the other players joining the table, and a beautiful woman as the game's dealer. The table and cards could be reused in all 3 games, so I just had to focus on programming the differences between the 3 games. I finished the game in a couple of hours. The problem was that my divine power, which had risen from 1,495 to 1,722 in the last 2 days, now fell back to 1,310, as I had spent 412 divine power points to create this new game, bringing me to my lowest divine power point yet. But I didn't mind too much, because I knew that I would get it back quickly. So, not wanting to waste any time, I tested the game's features to make sure there weren't any bugs, and noticing that everything was working perfectly as it should, I launched it on the internet. Elliot's POV. When Elliot saw his friends commenting on the internet, and talking about how amazing it was to be able to read such incredible stories on the internet after being introduced to it by a friend of a friend. He began to feel jealous. As someone who never had the opportunity to learn to read, Elliot never felt that this was a big problem for him. He still managed to work as a bricklayer. He earned enough copper coins to buy food for his family, even if it wasn't luxurious food. And he even had a few coins left over to have fun betting with the other men in the pub. But ever since one of the men had shown them the internet, and they had all been so amazed at the books and stories they could read for free, Elliot had started to feel left out, because he could see that the internet was really quite interesting, but unfortunately he couldn't enjoy any of it because he couldn't read. He had prayed to the god of the internet to find something interesting for him on the internet, but the only fun he could find was to stare at the beautiful, delicate covers of books without being able to read them. Just as Elliot was about to put the book away out of boredom, a window appeared on the screen with something written on it. Although he was amazed, Elliot couldn't understand what it said, so he didn't worry too much and closed the book. But when he heard what his friends were saying, Elliot was confused. "What is this, a warning?" One of his friends was puzzled. "Yeah, I guess I'll try to read this warning and see what it's about." Another of his friends commented with concentration as he stared intently at the screen. "Read it out loud." Another friend, who couldn't read either, asked the man to read it out loud so he could understand. Elliot heard this and thought with disdain, "What's the point of him reading it out loud? We won't even be able to enjoy it, because it will tell us." But even though he thought this with disdain, Elliot kept his ears open and waited for the words of his friend who could read. But even though he could read, the man wasn't very good at it and read very slowly. "Warning, a new app has arrived on the internet. A new application has arrived on the internet." He got excited as soon as he read this. "A new app?" Another man asked in surprise. "What's this new app about?" Another man asked. Hearing that it was a new app, Elliot, who had just discovered what an app was, became interested. "Will I be able to have fun with this new app?" The new app is called Cardmaster with Games Fun. The new app is called Cardmaster with Fun Games. The man read it twice to make sure, because he was excited. "There really is a new app in my book." One of the illiterate men looked at his book and was shocked to see the new app with an image he had never seen before. The icon of the app was the icon of 3 cards with a crown on top, which made the commoners shocked and curious as to what it was. "Is this something from the nobles?" One of the men asked uncertainly, making the other men worry. "I'll see what it is." One of the men said excitedly as he clicked and opened the application under the curious and attentive eyes of the other men. In the eyes of the men who could read, this app was very interesting and innovative, but in the eyes of those who couldn't read, like Elliot, this app was what they expected. Although there was writing on the screen, all the important things had drawings indicating what they were for, making it easier for them to understand how to use the app, and to Elliot's surprise, he even learned how to play cards. In just one night, the internet, which was still somewhat unknown to the people, became something very popular and talked about in the pubs and inns of the town. Chapter 14, Cardmaster. Upon entering his favorite watering hole, Grant was shocked by the scene before him. Instead of men gathered around tables with dice while they drank and wagered a few pennies, the vast majority of men at that moment were sitting at tables with books in their hands. To confirm this, Grant even left the pub and looked back at the entrance to make sure he was in the right place, then walked back in and was shocked to see friends of his holding books. All of their books had black covers with a red heart design, while the outline of the design was delicately drawn with very elegant little patterns, showing just how expensive these books were. As Grant approached the table where his friends were sitting, he saw one of his friends with a big smile on his face as he looked between the book he was holding and the other 4 people at the table. "You're screwed with my hand. I'll bet 5 chips," Elliot said as he rubbed his finger on something in the book and laughed as he looked around at his friends. And that was what confused Grant the most, because he knew Elliot very well, even to the point of knowing that Elliot couldn't read. So why was Elliot holding a book? "Hey guys, where did you get such a flimsy book?" Grant couldn't resist asking after greeting them. Looking in the direction of the voice, the men looked at the newly arrived Grant and greeted him back. "Wait until the game is over, Grant, and I'll explain," one of his friends said as he went back to concentrating on his book. Hearing this, Grant became even more curious and went to sit next to this friend, wanting to see what was in this book that was making everyone act so strangely, even the illiterate. When he looked into the book, Grant was shocked to see that there were glowing things inside. Is this a magic book? Grant wondered in shock. Knowing how expensive magic books were, he knew there was no way his friends could afford books like this, but almost everyone in the pub was holding books just like this. Out of curiosity, Grant walked over to another friend and saw that his friend's book also had shiny things in it, and even more surprisingly, the things in this book were different from the things he saw in the other book. But they were so focused on this game that no one stopped to explain to Grant what was going on. Until finally Elliot won the other men's chips and the hand was over, allowing them to take a break while they began to explain to Grant what was going on and invited him over to play as well. Hearing the explanation that this book was actually a divine artifact that the God of the Internet, the God of Old Father Robert's church, made available to believers who prayed to him, shocked Grant. Even more so after his friend showed him all the things he could do on the Internet, which made Grant even more excited to the point that he even prayed and saw the beautiful book floating in front of him. The friend who invited him got excited when he saw the 10 Internet coins that had just been added to his account, and quickly deposited 2 more Internet coins into Cardmasters, adding them to the 7 coins he had left after losing 3 coins to Elliot, for a total of 27 coins in his account. He hadn't even bought any books after going online. He just directly deposited the Internet coin he had for checking in today after learning that he would get 2 more Internet coins for free tomorrow. In a few minutes of adjustment and tutorial, Grant quickly learned how to play and also joined them to play poker. While there were a few people at other tables playing blackjack, or even people playing solitaire, almost everyone was using the Internet at the moment. Adrian's POV. It was hard not to smile when I looked at the number of believers using the Internet right now. From the 60 believers I had at the beginning of the day, that number has quadrupled to 240 believers tonight after the Cardmasters launch. The amount of divine power points I received every hour was almost 100 points, considering that not all users were online at the time, but that number was staggering. When the Internet update arrived, Father Robert's reaction was priceless, even more so when he realized that I had commented on card games with him before the game was released. He imagined that I was just checking the world's information for the Internet God and felt very honored to be consulted. I just pretended that was really the case and spent some more time helping him plan things for school and went out to see how the players were responding to the new app. But before I left, I gave Father Robert a tip. When he heard my tip, he quickly opened Carrier Pigeon and made a post just as I suggested. The Church of Internet God is offering classes for those who want to learn to read and write to use the Internet. Tell your friends and family who can't read to come to the Church of the Internet God to learn to read and write under Father Robert. Don't let this opportunity pass you by. As soon as this post was made, dozens of replies came in and several users liked the priest's post. Seeing his reaction as he received notifications from people who liked and commented on his post thanking him, the smile on the priest's face became gigantic. This is great. My son is dying to use the Internet, but he can't read yet. My friends who can't read are very excited about this. They're going to church tomorrow. Thank you, Father Robert, for this idea. How much are the lessons, Father Robert? Seeing the people asking how much the lessons would cost, the priest was surprised and turned to look for Athenos, but seeing only a lifeless white statue, he became worried as he thought about a fair price. I didn't want to interfere with the price he wanted to charge, since he was helping me get the faithful to use the Internet even more. What was wrong with letting the man make money? It's not like money would do me any good, especially a few pennies like that. After much thought, Father Robert finally came up with a figure and replied. The classes cost 2 copper coins a week to help maintain the church. He replied, worried that this amount would be considered too high. A day's work for a commoner earned an average of 7 to 14 copper coins a day, or an average of 63 copper coins a week. If he hired 30 students, he would earn 60 coins a week, which would be enough to live on and also give some coins to Amber to thank her for her help. But he was afraid that Athenos would be angry with him for receiving this money while helping the god. Fortunately, the reaction of the people was very good, because 2 copper coins weren't much to spend a week learning to read. At the end of the day, I looked at my amount of divine power with a big smile. Character status. Name: Adrian Innovation. Titles: God of creativity, God of the internet. Level: embryonic divinity rank 1. Divine power: 1310/10,000-1910/10,000 plus 600. I had received a total of 600 divine power points from all the believers today, considering that many of them hadn't used the internet for such a long time. And considering that when the men went home, they told their families about the internet, either to show how amazing it was, or just to get the 10 internet coins they received for the invitations. This meant that I received even more believers at the end of the night, even though these believers didn't use the internet for a long time before they went asleep. When all the believers were asleep and there were no new arrivals, I felt the number of believers and had a big smile when I realized that 290 people had used the internet so far. At the rate the internet is spreading, I don't doubt that soon the capital of the Arcantor Kingdom will be completely conquered by me. The next day, Father Robert's surprise was huge when he realized that more than 100 people wanted to sign up to learn to read and write. In fact, he was so confused about whether to accept these people and receive the 200 copper coins that he desperately prayed to me again for advice. But while I was taking control of the statue in the church and going to help Father Robert, an emergency meeting was being held at the Arcantor School of Magic, the largest magic school in the kingdom. And the purpose of this meeting was a certain book that one of the students was reading during one of the school's classes. The cover of the book read, "Mortal Magic, Apprentice." The book itself was very good, but that wasn't the reason for an emergency meeting of the school's administration. The real reason was who was behind this book, the new god of Arcantor. Chapter 15, Emergency Meeting. In a meeting room inside the Arcantor Magic School, 2 men and a woman sat in the main chairs, while another 25 people were scattered among the 30 normal chairs. Only one person was standing, a young boy in a white robe. The difference in identity between them was clear, both from the position of their chairs and the clothes they wore. The 3 main people wore purple robes, while the other 25 people wore red robes, like some kind of uniform. In Arcantor Magic School, the red cloak was only allowed for sage mages, representing the power and prestige that a sage mage had. The purple cloak, on the other hand, was reserved for the 3 archmages of the kingdom, signifying the royalty and mystery that this level of power represented. The white cloak, on the other hand, was for the magical apprentices, representing that they were a blank slate, ready to be painted any color by the knowledge they would come in contact with along the way. To put it in proportions, while a single sage mage was extremely powerful, equivalent to the destruction a battle tank could cause in a medieval war, the archmages were on a level where the destruction they could cause was on the level of an atomic bomb. Despite the different identities that each of the participants in this meeting had, they all had worried expressions on their faces as they looked at the boy in the white cloak and the book in the hand of Jaina, the only woman among the archmages. As Jaina analyzed the book in her hands, everyone remained silent, waiting for what she would say. The contents of this book show an understanding of apprentice-level magic so profound that not even I would have the confidence to write something of this quality and depth. Whoever wrote it may be on a higher level than me, Jaina said with a serious look on her face. Looking at the blonde woman who seemed to be only 28 years old, everyone in the room was shocked, even the other 2 archmages. "Are you sure, Jaina? Between us, you're the archmage with the best didactics. Is it possible that whoever wrote this book is above archmage level?" Harry, a brown-haired man with round glasses who seemed to be in his 40s, asked in surprise. "The last wizard to cross the archmage barrier died thousands of years ago. Maybe this book is some kind of remnant of that wizard?" Charles, the oldest-looking archmage who seemed to be in his 50s, said thoughtfully. Although all the archmages looked very young, their ages were already very advanced, with Jaina being the youngest among them, only 68 years old, though she looked 28, Harry 96 years old, and Charles, the oldest, 113 years old. Since they were on a very advanced path of magic, their life expectancy had increased greatly, especially compared to commoners, who had a much lower life expectancy than people from the countryside. "That's not a remnant of that wizard," Jaina sighed as she looked deeper into the book. "How could it not be? Who could have written it? If someone had become an archmage, we would know about it, let alone someone who went beyond that." Harry commented confused. Shifting her gaze from the book she was holding to the young wizard apprentice in the white cloak, Jaina spoke. Raymond, explain to everyone where you got this book. Hearing the Archmage say his name, Raymond, the young apprentice wizard, stepped forward and prepared to explain where he got the book. In his mind, Raymond cursed himself for his greed in wanting to read the magic book he had bought from the Arcantor Magic School on the internet. Why didn't I wait to read it at home? He mentally cursed himself for being so stupid, especially since he felt that fate was against him as he walked through the corridors of the school. When Archmage Jaina passed him and was amazed by the letters of the book glowing in the dark. When she asked him where he got it, Raymond knew he was screwed and didn't even try to lie, just confessed that he got it by praying to the god of the internet. Hearing this, Jaina got serious and quickly took him to the meeting room where only sage mages had access and called an emergency meeting. When Raymond saw so many sage mages coming to the meeting because of him, he already felt that he was screwed, but when even the other two archmages of the kingdom came to the meeting, Raymond just had a mental breakdown and just hoped that nothing would happen to his family. With so much money invested in him for the better future he could bring to the family, Raymond was his family's hope to rise from a mere barony to an even better noble position. Unfortunately, Raymond imagined that from now on he wouldn't exist anymore, and the only thing left for him to do was to be obedient in order to lessen the punishment for his family. I summoned this book after praying to the god of the internet, Raymond said in a quiet voice. Hearing where this book came from, everyone was shocked. You said you got it by praying to a god? Charles asked in an even more serious voice as a subtle spiritual pressure leaked out of him, making Raymond almost unable to control his own bladder. Yes, Lord Charles. I'm sorry, Raymond said, controlling himself as much as possible so as not to humiliate himself in front of everyone. With Raymond's acknowledgement, Charles realized that he had overreacted to the boy and quickly regained control of his own magical pressure. As soon as the pressure returned to his body, even the wise mages breathed a sigh of relief, as even they felt pressured by this accidental display of power. Turning his gaze to Jaina and Harry, Charles sighed as he noticed the same concern on the faces of the other two archmages. But unlike them, the wise wizards were confused as to why they were so worried. Please, Harry, explain to them why we're so worried. I need to calm down a bit, Charles said, sighing and closing his eyes. Hearing this, Harry sighed and nodded before looking at the wise wizards. Several centuries ago, the world was invaded by a powerful god. The power of this god was so enormous that even the most powerful archmages and centurions of various kingdoms were no threat to the god. Archmage Harry said with a serious and slightly frustrated voice. Hearing that not even archmages or centurions, the equivalent of archmages among knights, could pose the slightest threat to this god, the wise mages were completely shocked. But the most shocked of all was Raymond, who had just discovered that he was praying to such a powerful being. Archmage Harry continued. After showing how weak the archmages and centurions were compared to him, the god didn't attack or cause any damage. He just ordered all the kingdoms to build a church in every capital, but as long as that church was always functional, it could be built anywhere. Hearing this, the various wise mages began to remember the old church run by a single priest in the city. Seeing their recognition, Archmage Harry nodded. Yes, the church in the capital of Arcantor was built at the command of that powerful and mysterious god. This god never said his name or what the origin of his divinity was, only that the churches should be built and that a few years later, other gods would come to these churches and fight. Each church would represent a country, and the gods of each church would be responsible for bringing qualitative changes to the countries they were in, Archmage Harry explained. Archmage Harry explained. Hearing this, the wise mage's eyes widened in shock, especially when they realized the implications of this. Yes, that god may have come to pave the way for his subordinate gods to come to our world to fight each other in some kind of competition, and we're probably just the pawns on that big board, Harry said regretfully. Even though hundreds of years have passed and the story of that day is only passed down to the leaders of each country, many today wouldn't even believe it to be true, but apparently, this one, he said, pointing to the book in Jaina's hand. It is proof that the day has finally come. Listening to Archmage Harry's explanation, both the wise mages and Raymond were completely shocked. These gods, are they as powerful as the god our ancestors saw in the past? One of the wise mages asked. I don't think so. Archmage Jaina replied. Perhaps our world is being used as a test to select the best among the gods, so the extremely powerful god who came in the past was one of the test examiners, while the current gods are like the examinees. Hearing this, the wise mages at least heaved a sigh of relief, knowing that they weren't dealing with such frightening figures. But don't let that fool you. Charles warned. We are only speculating, but the strength of this god that has appeared remains unknown. What we should understand now is what course of action to take after understanding all the information we have about this mysterious god. As soon as Charles said this, he opened his eyes, looked at Raymond much more calmly, and asked politely, Young Raymond, please tell us everything you know about this internet god. Hearing Archmage Charles's question and knowing all the background of what was going on, Raymond was no slouch and began to tell him exactly everything he knew so far. Chapter 16. Investing in School. So he just provides entertainment and information in exchange for prayers? Harry asked, confused. That's what it sounds like, Lord Harry. Ever since I heard about the internet, I realized that it offers both entertainment, such as interesting books, a forum for people to chat from anywhere in the kingdom, card games, and for information, the library offers the magical books practically for free, with only the cost of a prayer for an hour's use. Raymond explained with his head bowed. And how did you feel after you prayed? Jaina asked curiously. I felt like some of my mental power had been used up, like I'd done a Lumos spell a few times in a row, nothing too strong, but it can wear me out after 7 or 8 prayers, Raymond explained. Nodding her head, Jaina looked at the book as she used the other functions of it. Raymond had explained how to use it, and there were explanations of how to use it for her mind as well. But because she had very strong mental defenses, this information was blocked outside her mind for her to accept or reject. As far as she could tell, there was no malice in this information. It was just politely offered to her mind and disappeared if she chose to reject it, which was quite considerate. Considering the frightening image she'd had of the gods ever since she'd heard the backstory on becoming an archmage, the impression this internet god gave was much better. Is it possible to know how many people have access to the internet? Asked Charles thoughtfully. From the posts on Carrier Pigeon, I believe there are already hundreds of people using the internet right now, and the possible number is only getting higher and higher, Jaina said as she looked at the number of posts and likes these posts had. Although this was all very new and innovative to her, it was still very easy to understand, especially for a mind as developed as hers. How long has this been going on? Charles asked Raymond again. I believe less than a week, Lord Charles, Raymond replied politely. Hearing this explanation, Charles became even more thoughtful. Hundreds of users in a week. Considering the benefits it brings, it's only a matter of time before the number of people using it exceeds 4 digits. If it hasn't already, in a month it could have taken over the Arcantor capital if we do nothing. The sage mages were shocked by this possibility. But when they thought about how useful it really seemed after Raymond's explanation, and how practical it seemed to be to use, not even a single copper coin was needed. As long as the person can read, it's possible that he might be tempted to use the internet to try to become a wizard. What should we do, Lord Charles? Ban the use of the internet? Asked a frightened wizard. It's impossible to ban it. Who will stop ordinary people from using the internet in their homes at night? Jaina immediately refuted this idea. Jaina's right. Banning it will not only cause the number of users to decrease, but it may even increase as people will know that we're blocking something and will try to find out what it is, Charles sighed. So what are we going to do? Another wise mage asked worriedly. Hearing this, the 3 archmages looked at each other and realized that they were thinking the same thing. We should meet with the god of the internet and try to find out his goal for our land, Harry said in a firm voice, receiving a nod from the other 2 archmages. Jaina added, if his intentions are chaotic and destructive to our country, even if it's dangerous and may lead to our deaths, we must fight. Charles finished, but if his intentions are not evil, it's not impossible to find a middle ground and use this as an opportunity for our country. With the reasoning of the 3 archmages, the wise mages became calmer and a plan began to form in this meeting room. Unaware that the internet was the subject of a meeting at the Arcantor School of Magic, I just concentrated on helping Father Robert with the school. This being a medieval world, It was understandable that the nobles didn't care about the education of the commoners, or rather, they preferred them to remain ignorant, as it was easier to deceive and manipulate them that way. But I saw no advantage in that. If the people were better educated and at least knew how to read and write, that would be much more useful to me, as they would be able to use the internet even more and increase the number of times they prayed each day. So helping Father Robert develop a school was a high priority for me. Thank you for coming again, Lord Athenos. The old man thanked me as he bowed to me. Don't worry, Father Robert. Tell me, what's your question? I asked. Embarrassed, he admitted the reason for his guilt. I announced that I would open the school and teach people to read and write at a cost of 2 copper coins a week. I imagined that only 15 people at most would sign up to learn, Lord Athenos, but more than 100 people have shown interest in learning from me so that they can use the internet better. Hearing that, I just smiled and asked him, and what's wrong with that? The problem is that it would earn me 200 copper coins or 2 silver coins a week, Lord Athenos. I feel guilty about receiving so much money. Father Robert explained with his head down. I just laughed at that and answered his doubt with another question. Tell me, Father Robert, if you had 200 copper coins available to you every week to reinvest in the school, to hire other people to help you teach even more people, to divide those 100 people into 2 classes of 50 people for 2 people to teach, would that be better or worse for the God of the internet? Hearing this, the old man's eyes lit up again. That would certainly be better. Yes, the excess copper coins can be used to hire more teachers, buy better desks so that students can learn to read and write more comfortably, improve the general structure of the church. All of this can only be achieved with money, so don't despise the coin. Despise what despicable people do with the coin, I said with a reassuring smile, causing the old man's eyes to widen in shock. Yes, talking to you always broadens my horizons, Lord Athenos, thank you. Robert thanked me. I nodded at him as I thought of something. Seeing your dedication to teaching people and helping the God of the internet made me think of writing a book that focuses on helping you teach them how to write. I'll pass this idea on to the God of the internet, and maybe this book will be available in the library by your first class, so just focus on organizing things around here, and I'll help you up there too, I said as I pointed to the sky. Hearing this, Robert's eyes became even brighter with gratitude, and I simply went back to where the statue normally stood and took my consciousness out of this body. Instead of making a book specifically to teach mortals how to write, I, who didn't have very good teaching *LLS in either of my 2 lives, simply asked the school staff for some literacy books, and within a few minutes they arrived at my cabin. With these books, I read them in just 2 hours and managed to create virtual versions of these books and make them available in the library. For people who were already literate, these books were a great way to teach people who couldn't read to start learning. The ideal would be if there was a way for me to use audio on the internet without increasing the cost of divine power per hour to the point of making it a loss-making activity, because audio on the internet would make it possible for even illiterate people to learn to read on their own. But since there was no way to do that now, I just concentrated on improving what I already had while watching the number of believers grow. Last night I went to bed with 290 believers, and by the end of the evening that number had increased to 435 believers, an increase of 50% in just one day. With the increase in users, the average time of use dropped slightly to just 3 hours per day per user. But that was still a very satisfying number. In just one day, I had gained another 1,305 divine power points. Character status. Name: Adrian Innovation. Titles: God of Creativity, God of the Internet. Level: Embryonic Divinity Rank 1. Divine Power: 1,910/10,000-3,215/10,000 plus 1,305. My divine power had more than doubled in just 2 days, and considering how fast it was growing, it wouldn't be long before I could become a rank 2 embryonic deity. The next day would be Father Robert's first class. Following my advice, he hired Amber at a salary of 50 copper coins per week to serve as his assistant in the classroom. But to my surprise, among the students in Father Robert's first class was a woman with a completely different profile from the ordinary students. Strangely enough, no one noticed the abnormality of that woman. Listen to next 7 videos on Patreon.